Daydream.
Welcome to this new episode of Fact Heist. Today we will try to understand the mechanism behind maladaptive daydreaming, a mental health issue that causes you to spend an enormous percentage of your life trapped in your own head. Or somewhere else, never in the present. That's a condition that is not dangerous for physical health at all. However, it can have a huge impact on mental health, and therefore your entire life. And it is estimated that, worldwide, around 2.5% of people are affected by this mental issue, including yours truly. Maladaptive daydreaming is a mental health issue, but not yet a mental health disorder, in which someone daydreams excessively. Sometimes for like several hours at a time. No shit. Such hardcore mind wanderers tend to lose themselves in some extremely fanciful, structured, vivid and detailed daydreams. And I repeat, sometimes for hours on end. As a matter of fact, this trouble is sometimes referred as fanciful daydreaming, because one of the key differences between maladaptive daydreaming and your average daydreaming is the area of fantasy, which will actually contain way much more fantasy than regular daydreaming. With like very elaborate plots, as well as well-developed distinct characters and shit.
My man. Hey, my man, you still there?
Hey.
What, did you pass out or?
No, I just zoned out for a second.
Oh, okay. Do you do that a lot?
Normal amount, I guess.
But fantasy and reality are oftentimes not confused at all. Only 2% of them people have difficulty separating reality from their fantasy. So individuals immersing themselves in such daydream do understand it is in fact a daydream. They are not lost in the fantasy. Those fictional stories are often created for no purpose outside of pleasure, as they can elicit really strong emotions or feelings in general. Someone can go into some daydream and snap out of it sad or happy or whatever. Many different responses with some reward component, so the daydream can often be described as addictive. Therefore, some people may be deliberately entering these daydreams to get some reward of some sort, which sounds a lot like addiction. In maladaptive daydreaming, the word maladaptive means this type of daydreams are unhealthy and damaging, and can be some kind of negative attempt to cope with or adapt to a problem. This type of daydreaming might also be compulsive, meaning it's hard to control, resulting in difficulties to deal with like real-life shit. So these individuals can neglect IRL relationships and responsibilities. Yeah, tell me about that. As maladaptive daydreaming is disrupting for social activities like school or work, and interfering with daily tasks or hobbies, or simply reaching any goal in life. Some people with maladaptive daydreaming may sometimes choose to daydream rather than spending time with their fellow human beings, because the parasocial interactions with people occurring in the daydream can easily replace human interaction, for real, so people can sometimes share some quality time with someone who's not there for real. Translation, they don't even need anyone to be with someone. Some people can suffer from maladaptive daydreaming.
No, I'm not okay.
As they can frequently struggle with negative feelings and effects resulting from this issue, like clinical distress and functional impairment. Some of them can work really hard to keep the daydreams canceled due to obvious embarrassment.
It was like watching yourself on TV inside your own head, but you couldn't turn it off. It was not a good time.
When some of the deep fictional conversations and inner speeches can rapidly turn into public self-talking. And indeed, people who experience this immersive type of mind wandering might not have much control over it, and commonly feel bad about it, despite the reward component. So that's really consistent with all that addiction vibe that's been observed, as it can interfere with many parts of life. People can, in turn, experience some feeling of shame and guilt for doing it, especially when you consider the difference in time spent daydreaming between maladaptive daydreaming people and, let's say, the average, random,
Ordinary scum.
Because regular human people spend, on the average, around 16% of their waking hours daydreaming. And for those non-maladaptive people, for more than 97% of the population, the nature of the daydreams is more reality-based, and seems to often revolve around wish fulfillment and planning stuff ahead and shit. While, on the other hand, maladaptive daydreamers often need, because there's a need to spend around 57% of their waking hours engaging in the act of immersive daydreaming. I think this really highlights how frequently daydreaming needs to occur when it's considered to be maladaptive. Moreover, maladaptive daydreams tend to involve elaborate plots, with real or fictional characters, with different time periods, sometimes involving specific fictional genre like science fiction for example. These daydream sessions can be triggered by any activities, stressors or any other stimuli, you name it. But despite not being part of the DSM-5, maladaptive daydreaming requires nonetheless some mandatory symptoms. Symptoms we can divide into two groups. the first one being all about behaviors and shit, and the second one being more about, like, emotions and shit. The first, behavioral, group of symptoms requires complexity. The daydreams often have very detailed, elaborate, and intricate plots and characters, just like some TV show that you can, sometimes, watch over and over again. Duration. The daydreams have to last for an extensive amount of time, sometimes for hours at once. Some intensity. The daydreams are a lot stronger and vivid and immersive than your average daydream. But also disconnection. The daydreams are, indeed, so intensely immersive that people can disconnect from the world around them, sometimes to the point of not noticing shit happening around. And intent. The intent to intentionally start to daydream, like on purpose. The second group of symptoms, because we're doing this, remember? So this second group has to deal with emotional type of shit symptoms, like how people feel about maladaptive daydreaming, and how they can often have negative feelings about it. They can define this construct as compulsive, extensive, impairing, and causing distress. So these, quote marks, symptoms are feelings of shame or guilt, and people may feel bad about it, especially when maladaptive daydreaming fucks with several aspects of a regular life. I mean, like, issues with school or work. Yeah, tell me about that.
I'm looking for the least possible amount of responsibility.
Troubles with social activities, because people may spend more time daydreaming than they spend with their fellow human beings. And most of all, they may feel the need to daydream, sometimes to a craving level. If people can't daydream, they may feel upset and angry if they've missed an opportunity to do so. And some studies find that this need can be similar to addiction.
For what reason?
Because people often struggle to daydream less or to stop it altogether. Furthermore, more than 80% of studied people reported movement during daydreams, because maladaptive daydreams can, occasionally, drive people into repetitive movements during an episode, movements like rocking or pacing. Moreover, researchers show that people sometimes end up making facial expressions, talking, laughing, or even crying. So there seems to be a strong emotional investment component in the daydream. Besides, around 50% of maladaptive daydreamers can feel a strong urge to daydream just like right after waking up. Likewise, when they've been interrupted, there's a need to go back there as soon as the interruption is over. Personally, it all starts at the very second I wake up. As my OCD makes me prone to earworms, some music starts instantly when I snap out of sleep, like I'm not in charge, like I have no agency at all. So some music loop starts as loud as it can get, of course, and then here comes the inner dialogues, often about some point I would want to make, for some real past conversation I had, or that I would have, with someone I know or that I don't, from real life or on TV or whatever. The topics often revolves around something really stupid I heard the day before, or something really smart I want to process and integrate, so it runs and reruns over and over again in my head. During the day, maladaptive daydreaming not only entertains myself, but it helps me glide through daily tasks and chores to the point I can even forget about what's already been done. Actually, on some social setting, if you don't talk to me for like 5 or 10 seconds, my mind can start to daydream as automatically as some late 90s screensaver starts. But it would be more of a mind saver instead. It's rarely about pipes though. And because of the resulting unresponsiveness,
Hello? Hello? Anybody home?
people can often think I'm kinda deaf or something. But sometimes I can actually be so far gone that I would pretend I understood everything crystal clear firsthand.
Absolutely.
Interestingly, my daydreams are also rarely about sci-fi. Despite being a nerd, my daydreams are reality grounded 99% of the time. My friends like to refer to it as
Le pays des mondes.
which could be some French for the country of the worlds, which makes no sense, but that's the point, I guess.
That does not make sense.
This focus mode mental activity can be so pleasant and addictive that, sometimes, I prefer watching the ceiling rather than going outside with the homies. I can also display involuntary movements, and speak out loud my inner speeches and dialogues, which can be embarrassing and make you look like a freak. I mean, even more than I already am. This is why I developed some next-level ventriloquism skills. No shit. I could make millions in Vegas, I guess.
Pickles and ketchup and mayonnaise.
But if you are not as gifted as I am, here's a tip. You can, endlessly, talk to yourself in public, as long as you have some earbuds or AirPods on. You will just look normal now. The term maladaptive daydreaming was originally coined in 2002 by some psychology professor dude named Eli Summer, and this term has kind of caught on since then. As previously stated, it's not officially a mental disorder of its own, at this point anyway, but rather a construct, some construct of some sort, because there's no classification or disorder or whatever in the DSM-5 that refers to some highly structured daydreams happening as a primary symptom. But some researches have shown that maladaptive daydreaming can nevertheless be highly comorbid, or overlap with several really real mental disorders, or overlap with neurological conditions.
What's their guess?
Depression, panic attacks, anxiety, a smattering.
Because maladaptive daydreaming seems to be, indeed, most common in people with specific mental health issues, brain dysfunction, or neurological conditions. Wait for a sec, just checking something. Yes, yes, no, yes, yes, no, and most deaf. Maladaptive daydreaming is more common in people afflicted with anxiety disorders, along with post-traumatic disorder, dissociative disorders, certain types of depression, as well as autism.
Bitch, please.
But research expert scientists also found stronger correlations between this immersive dreaming condition and other highly comorbid mental issues, like attention deficit hyperactivity disorder and obsessive-compulsive disorder. And effectively, people with maladaptive daydreaming score higher on all of the subscales of both the ADHD and OCD psychometrics instruments, whatever instruments they can be. As a result, counselors can oftentimes diagnose ADHD or OCD when they encounter someone with maladaptive daydreaming symptoms.
Have you been checked for ADHD?
But I've had several STDs which were probably caused by ADHD.
For instance, in ADHD, long story short, people, on the average, have small but nonetheless important differences in the size of some part of their brains that other people don't have. Not any brain areas, no. Usually areas like the prefrontal cortex, which is in charge of executive functions like planning, decision-making, and self-motivation. And people with ADHD look to have indeed issues and troubles going on with executive functions. This might be a reason why there's so much overlap between ADHD and MDD. I mean maladaptive daydreaming. I could have gone with MDD instead. This could have saved us some time. But this reminds me too much of some 90s douchebag rapper. So people with ADHD can also experience similar troubles with managing their emotions, meaning there's probably similar differences in their brains or brain chemistry. However, more research is needed. Likewise, there also seems to be a vicious cycle between maladaptive daydreaming and obsessive-compulsive disorder symptoms. Research shows that there can be a surge in OCD symptoms right before some fanciful daydreaming episode. But this topic is still in its early years, so studies can be, yet, quite contradictory. So there's no definitive conclusion yet. For example, OCD compulsions are supposed to elevate anxiety, but maladaptive daydreams are described as more voluntary and enjoyable, and someone can still get out of these immersive daydreams completely sad or crying or whatever. So we don't fully understand yet WTF is going on there either. This existing knowledge on maladaptive daydreaming suggests that the involvement of obsessive-compulsive symptoms, as well as the positive reinforcement, are comparable to processes happening in addiction disorders, because as previously stated, there's a strong link between maladaptive daydreaming and addiction, or at least, behavioral addiction. For example, there's a dichotomy between the daydream being pleasant and comfortable, and disruptive at the same time. We also see some difficulties in controlling the need to daydream, interferences at school or work, along with the positive reinforcement of this rewarding behavior. All of this makes daydream effects comparable to the processes going on in addiction disorders.
Ground control to Major Tom. Can you hear me, Major Tom?
As a matter of fact, this addictiveness is thought to stem from a release of serotonin, the fun brain neurotransmitter that makes you feel happy, along with some dysfunctions within inhibitory brain circuitry. Actually, this happens to work similarly in a compulsive manner, the same way in maladaptive daydreamers, as well as in chronically addicted individuals with high relapse rate. This highly rewarding behavior and its addictive characteristics are oftentimes why people with maladaptive daydreaming initially seek treatment. Lastly, some experts suspect maladaptive daydreaming can, sometimes, be a coping mechanism for trauma. Apparently, many people with this maladaptive thing have some history of trauma or abuse, especially during childhood. This could mean trauma or child abuse could cause maladaptive daydreaming. But hold on. Later and newer studies found that there's no particularly strong link between MDD and trauma. Maladaptive daydreaming is neither some type of psychosis because, just to be clear, with psychosis, people can't tell the difference between reality and fantasy, or hallucinations, my emphasis. So, there's no actual relationship with trauma, and certainly no relationship with hallucinations either. But how and why does all of this happen in the first place? I mean, on a brain level and shit. First of all, not all daydreaming is maladaptive, right? And we know that over 95% of people daydream on a daily basis, so it's relatively common. So let's consider this regular daydreaming form first. The average type of daydreaming for the average person often deals with reviewing past interactions, like reviewing old discussions with acquaintances or something. But people also repeatedly daydream about planning out stuff. I mean, like activities, children concerns, daily tasks, career choices, like all sort of different aspects of adulthood shit actually. Furthermore, studies suggest the frequency with which people daydream is not only normal, but also a fundamental part of life. Actually, the capacity to daydream may have some essential evolutionary adaptive value. Because, according once again to researchers, the process of daydreaming helps us with creative problem solving. There's a value for distraction during demanding tasks, as it facilitates some creative periods of incubation. During those episodes, the thought process is lost here and there, and can stumble upon previously unexplored options for some previous unsolved problem. Moreover, some research also provided evidence this can result in a causal relationship between daydreaming and brain plasticity, aka the brain's capacity to remodel itself in response to new experiences. That's some kind of a win-win situation. So there's evidence that, evolutionarily speaking, daydreaming can play a role in shaping the brain's future response to shit happening. Researchers also show that it can enhance the sense of identity. The mind is a unique combination of experience, memories, emotions, thoughts, and beliefs. And by continuously remembering the past and envisaging the future, we can get a stronger subjective sense of who we are as individuals in the grand calculus of the multiverse. And researchers spent a shitload of time studying how neurons can form memories by replaying past events. So they went for the hippocampus, aka brain's memory factory, and tried to map its physical environment. Meanwhile, some other research team at Harvard has shown that brain activity increases in the visual cortex when subjects are asked to recall some image in detail. And indeed, other studies also confirmed such bursts in electrical brain activity in the hippocampus and the visual cortex during such recall. As a matter of fact, neuroimaging consistently demonstrates that the brain's never truly at rest. There's no such thing as the brain doing nothing. Even when you're chillaxing, there's nonetheless some background noise. As a matter of fact, during daydreaming, some very complex network in the brain fires up. There's activation of the default mode network, or DMN. That's a large-scale neural network with its own underlying mechanisms and regulations, composed of the posterior cingulate cortex, the dorsal medial prefrontal cortex, angular gyrus and precuneus, this thing. I think the name default mode network comes from the dude who discovered it, American actor Willem Dafoe. But I might be wrong about this one. This network is best known for being recruited whenever someone's not focused on the outside world, and when the brain is at a wakeful resting state. This network is also activated whenever someone remembers the past or imagines some possible future. This default mode network thing is heavily regulated by the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex. But this doesn't mean the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex inhibits the default mode network. It won't get you back to work when you're spacing out. As a matter of fact, and against all logic, if you stimulate someone's dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, you will instead increase activity of the default mode network. So long story short, current speculation is that the Willem default mode network enables to take advantage of the creative problem solving we do when mind wandering. To consider alternative perspectives, rather than engaging in certain behaviors in real life, someone can test and rehearse actions in advance, by mentally picturing their outcomes and therefore, hopefully, prevent some costly mistakes. The default mode network, aka medial frontotemporal network, is also active whenever somebody imagines what someone else might be thinking or feeling. This ability to put yourself in someone else's shoes
so comfy
is what allows humans to, allegedly, demonstrate empathy and to function supposedly, successfully in their primate social world. Side note, interestingly, psilocybin can produce the biggest changes in the default mode network, especially in the areas associated with neuropsychiatric disorders like depression, anxiety, PTSD, OCD, ADHD. But I don't think psilocybin can do anything for PDD. And as multiple brain areas need to be functional to enable to remember the past and to imagine the future, damages to any of such brain structures can result in imagination difficulties, and sometimes, severe impairments in allowing the brain to escape the present. For example, people suffering from dementia will as well lose the ability to daydream and forecast the future. This is particularly the case for Alzheimer's disease and frontotemporal dementia. If you don't know what this frontotemporal shit show is about, check our video about this very topic, link up there. Studies, link in the description below, revealed that both people with Alzheimer's and people with frontotemporal dementia showed difficulties in remembering important events from their past, and some inability to imagine events in the future. Bummer. neuroimaging determined that, indeed, damages to specific parts of this daydreaming network thing results in impairment in remembering the past and future thinking in people with dementia. But the damaged brain regions dealing with past and future thinking differ for each type of dementia. For Alzheimer's disease, deteriorations inside the parietal cortex are strongly linked to both impairment in remembering past events and imagining the future. On the other hand, for frontotemporal dementia, damages to midline frontal regions, FOSHO, were associated exclusively with troubles remembering the past. But I digress. I was supposed to explain WTF is going on in the brain of individuals with maladaptive daydreaming. And as a matter of fact, the only clue scientists have yielded is that serotonin levels might be possibly involved in the development or maintenance of this mental health issue. Some serotonin production may be lacking. Low levels of serotonin. So this is it. No shit. This is how far the research has gone so far. But is there any treatment or cure for this?
They can cure us?
There's no way to prevent maladaptive daydreaming.
They can't cure us.
Or even reduce the risk of developing it.
You want to know why? Because there's nothing to cure.
That's a lifelong concern that people can sometimes overcome. Nonetheless, overcoming this shit is quite difficult without medication or mental health therapy or both. My personal stance about this is
they wish to cure us, but I say to you, we are the cure!
A few treatments are available, like homeopathy. Just kidding, as this mental issue might stem from lower serotonin levels. As reviewed earlier, the best answer, yet, is obviously SSRIs, aka selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors. This kind of medication enables serotonin to stay a bit longer in the synaptic cleft, this space between neurons, therefore sending serotonin signals for longer. And indeed, that seems to successfully work, so go do that if you want. Mental health therapy seems to work quite good as well, and doesn't have any nasty side effects or complications. So go do that shit too if you want. Nevertheless, therapy might uncover and reveal painful past things that are difficult to face, like trauma or some shit. Nonetheless, the mental health provider can help to find ways to cope, process, and move on from past traumas and struggles.
I slap you, I slap you, I slap you. I slapping you silly cause you disrespected me.
But as regular daydreaming is extremely common in people, counselors might be hesitant to conceptualize maladaptive daydreaming as a mental health concern on its own, because there can be, obviously, reluctance to pathologize some normal behavior.
Nothing's wrong with you. Or any of us for that matter.
However, don't forget that much more research is needed as studies are still scarce, only relying on cross-sectional studies or case study designs. Unfortunately, those studies' online medium and language excluded non-English speaking people, as well as the poorest and less educated layers of society, and those who are not internet savvy.
Comment ils font pour rentrer sur Internet? Il doit y avoir une touche Internet. C'est peut-être vocal. Internet!
Replication studies, with sampling from more diverse populations, could render further support to the studies' findings. This mental issue recently gained public attention, and there are even many online communities devoted to this topic.
Internet!
Anyway, it may not rise to a mental health disorder level yet, and it may never reach this level ever. Who knows? So, maladaptive daydreaming is not, at this point anyway, a mental health disorder. Rather, still remain a construct. A mental health issue, which means it isn't contagious. And that's it for this episode of Fact Heist. We hope you've enjoyed it. Don't forget to like and subscribe. See you next time, piss piss.
Yo. Said to say ain't no catching up today. If you ain't real, get the fuck away. Fuck away. How you a G, you scared to bust a K. Bust K. Hit you with the butt or the Glock and it bust your face. So I'ma want no cuss today. The niggas got me fucked up, so it's fuck today. Acting like you got it looking rough today. I got on the day dress, but don't know what's the day. And I got that what's with the blue face. And I'm getting shit from County Blue face. Plus I'm sending shots like it's 2K. Screaming for these niggas cause they two-face. Let off one F and it sound like 2K. Let them bitches fly just like a bouquet. And he get a turn but she like Rose. I know that I ain't Jesus, call me Jose. Hit you with this rocky click like bro. All these magazines, no need for role play. She told me she was straight and she went both ways. I told her hold up pipe and she said okay. She told me that she love me, I said no way. She tried to kiss me here to push her face away. Up the pipe and go for the fade away. Hit you 3 times, I'm them J today. Mama used to say that I can't play today. Now I gotta see what show I play today. it rain up in the club, watch it get raped away. Baby told me I got some ungrateful way. I pop up in the middle of the hot block. Make the Glock pop, sound like pop rocks on your block. 10 shots from the 45 at 12 o'clock. I know the car tired of me because I built a lot. Swap man, they couldn't give me, and I smell like pot. $100 blunts, bitch, I smell like guap. Stepped in the grow house, now I smell like crop. Looked in the mirror, damn near say my pot. Shawty beating on my phone for me to beat a box. She can fuck all your bros, you gon' eat a box. Shawty say she crush a lot, and she creep a lot. Show your Uber outside, you tryna sleep a lot. I just want a 50 when she say I eat a lot. These niggas ain't street much, but I'm street a lot.